Welcome to the Big Bass Podcast, the fishing show where size matters. I'm Ken Duke.
And I'm Terry Battisti. Our producer and engineer is Nathan Benson. In this episode of the Big Bass Podcast, we take a look at the smallest state record largemouth bass in the country, North Dakota's 8-pound, 7.5-ounce fish caught in 1983.
We all know that in the world of fishing, big is a relative term. What counts as a big largemouth in Montana or Minnesota won't get much attention in Florida or California. The size of the North Dakota record is impressive in the Peace Garden State. Yes, I did look that up. But that's not the most interesting part of the story. You have to stay tuned for that.
And of course, we're not going to start with the current state record. That's not the way we do things here at the Big Bass Podcast. We start at the beginning. If we can find it, the information, we always start at the beginning. And the very first state record bass in the flicker tail state, another official nickname of North Dakota, along with the Rough Rider state. We're not making these up, folks. These are all listed as official state nicknames on state websites. So I can't add any more than that.
We were trying not to say North Dakota so often. We figured we'll throw in some well-known state nicknames. There aren't any. Yeah. There are all these weird nicknames for North Dakota. So anyway, here we go. Yeah. Terry, the first state record largemouth bass in the state of North Dakota was caught in 1953 by an angler named Albert Albrecht. He lived in Linton, North Dakota, and that fish weighed 7 pounds, 12 ounces.
How many fish have you caught over 7 pounds, 12 ounces, Ken?
How many fish have I caught? Well, a lot, I think, but maybe not by some standards. It kind of depends on who you're asking. Some of our recent guests, like Byron Velvick and Jerry Rago, they caught a lot of fish over 7-12. Me, maybe not so many, but dozens. I've caught dozens over 7-12, but I haven't caught any of them, Terry, in North Dakota.
That's a good point.
And I'm guessing you haven't either.
I have never been to North Dakota, therefore I can't claim a fish out of the state. South Dakota, I can claim a Wyoming fish, a Montana fish, but I can't claim.
Yeah, not so much from the flicker tail state. Actually, that's a squirrel. It turns out I had to look that up. It's a squirrel.
Oh, I thought it would be a bird or something like that.
I thought so too, but no, it's a squirrel. Some kind of squirrel. Anyway, almost no information on this fish about other than the weight. We don't know the length. We don't know the girth. We don't know what the guy caught it on. But we can tell you that fish came from something called Welk Dam, a lake in Emmons County, which is in south central North Dakota. It covers just 28 acres. And it was impounded in 1938, so the lake was only 15 years old at the time Albert Albrecht caught it back in 1953.
Which kind of makes sense with the new lake, deal, right? I mean, you've got a lake that's less than 50 years old, and therefore it's at its prime to produce a good fish.
Exactly. And what I learned in researching this story, Terry, is that for most of North Dakota largemouth bass record-keeping history, the big fish have come from the southern part of the state, which I guess makes sense because they would have a slightly longer growing season and so forth. But there is an exception that we'll be getting to in just a bit.
When you get above the 43rd parallel, I don't think there's much difference between the southern part of the state and the northern part of the state. They're always cold. Their growing season sucks. And having lived in Idaho above the 45th parallel and for about 4 or 5 years, and then above the 44th parallel for about 16 years, the growing season there is one or the other.
Way too cold for me. But Albrecht's record fish at 7-12 lasted quite a while. It held on for 26 years until an angler by the name of Tom Shetler from Burlington, North Dakota, caught a fish that was 2 ounces heavier at 7 pounds, 14 ounces. Again, we don't know how long the fish was. We don't know what the girth was. We don't even know what month and day of the month the fish was caught. But Terry, we do know a little bit about the bait.
Yeah, Rebel deep diving crankbait. And
Probably a
I
Super
mean, that was
R
a,
or a Wee R or something like that.
I could have been a Maxi R. Who knows?
Could have been that. Could have been a big one.
Yeah, it's hard to tell what it was, but in that 1970, actually from 70 to 1980, Rebel was a huge. They were a heavy hitter in the lure development business, and
Yeah,
any
and their
bass
signature
fisherman
bait
had.
was the deep Wee R. That
Oh
would have
yeah,
been
at
their.
that
That would have
point,
been
at
their.
that point in
Yeah.
time. But yeah, I mean they were giants in the industry, even though Bagley's. The thing is that you could buy a Bagley's for $3.25, but you could buy a Rebel for $1.59, and that's the
Yeah, the
reason.
difference between balsa and plastic right there.
Yeah, exactly, and that's why there was more Rebels in people's boxes than there were Bagley's, Balsa Bees, or even Norman's at that point. Because Norman was charging $1.99 or $2.25 for his stuff.
Yeah, those are the big guys who were making the deep diving crankbaits back at that time period. You
Hmm.
certainly had Cordell making more medium divers and stuff. But anyway,
Yeah.
let's
So
we
what about the
digress.
fishery? So
Well, the
what about the
fishing.
fishery?
Yeah, this one came out of Nelson Lake, which is in Oliver County, which is almost dead center in the state of North Dakota. As a matter of fact, the closest town is called Center, North Dakota. So, boy, if you want to know where it is, that pretty much tells you. Another, small lake. This lake was a lot bigger than Welk Dam at 28 acres, but this one was just 573 surface acres, maximum depth around 33 feet, average depth around 14. It was impounded in 1968, and that's just 11 years before this new record catch was made. And
Yeah.
that's
And you got the new lake, concept is taking place. Um,
but the
yeah.
reason, look at that. We don't know when this fish was caught, but we do know it's a little bit further north. And we know that the lake was only 11 years old. So you think, wow, in the short growing season up there, how does that happen after just 11 years? Well, Terry, we know the answer. We know exactly what the purpose of building this lake was and why you could produce a record fish so quickly.
I know the reason for producing the reservoir. What is it trout? Were there trout in this lake? I mean,
No. Actually, no. It was they dammed they dammed a creek called Square Butte Creek,
uh-huh.
and this was a cooling facility for their coal power
Oh,
plant.
okay,
So
okay,
this
all right,
lake, only under rare circumstances, does Nelson Lake freeze.
right. Yeah, yeah.
So
Cooling plant lakes are historic for, you know, they take a coal fire power plant or a nuclear power plant, and that water is used to cool the heat exchangers in order to produce steam, in order to turn a generator, blah blah blah. And those lakes generally, have 50-degree water all the way through the winter because of that.
yeah, so basically, you could fish this lake and not have to drill a hole through ice 12 months
Exactly.
out of the year. Now, my
Yep.
understanding is that part sections of the lake would freeze that were farthest from the cooling station, but for the most part, this lake was soft water
Stayed
all
wide
year
open.
long. Yeah,
Yep. That's a
so
that's a huge thing.
that was a huge thing, and it really and it was a fabulous big fish producer for a long,
Hmm.
long time, and may still be. Um, Enormously popular. It was where the area folks went to vacation, to water ski, to pleasure boat, to fish. And,
Yep.
it's pretty obvious why. When the rest of the state is frozen over, you can still get out here and enjoy yourself a
Exactly.
little bit. So that was a big deal. Now, the angler
Yep.
who caught it, a sad story here. His name was Thomas Andrew Shetler. He was from Burlington, North Dakota, and he was born in 1960 in North Dakota. And when he caught this fish, he was fishing from shore. He and some friends had used a small boat to get to the area they wanted to fish, and apparently at that point they were walking along some riprap or a rocky bank to fish. He was just 18 or 19 years old at the time he caught
Right.
this fish, and he was a freshman in college. And after he got out of school, he went to work in the family construction business, and later worked as a satellite technician for a phone company. And unfortunately, he passed away at a very young age, at
Yeah.
29. He was involved in a construction accident, passed away with a wife and two young daughters, and so very sad there.
Yeah. Yeah. That there's nothing good about that.
Yeah, we like to tell the stories of the anglers who catch these fish because too often that's we don't know anything about them. Most often when people talk about state records, all they can tell you is maybe the weight, the body of water it came from, and if they're really, really plugged in and care, they might know the name of the guy who caught it. But we want to go a little bit deeper into some of that stuff if we can, where we can. And it's not always easy, but I was able to track down a little information on the angler who had that record from 1979 until the early 80s. He had just a short time, but that was Thomas Andrew Shetler. And then, Terry, now we get to the part of the story that we promised would be interesting.
The meaty part.
It is. Exactly. Tell us
Yep.
about Leon Rixen.
Yeah. So in 1982, Leon Rixen from Minot, North Dakota, catches the new state
Not your
record.
knot, my knot.
Minot, and I know it's Minot because there's a missile base that I've been there for some reason. And
I thought you just told us you'd never been to North Dakota. Maybe you just said you'd never caught a fish.
Well, I've never fished in North Dakota. I've been to North Dakota, and unfortunately, I've been to North Dakota in January, which
Yikes.
is not the time that the tourists or the Chamber of Commerce would want you to go there.
Well, that's
It's,
obviously a mistake because on December 23rd of 1982, Leon Rixen caught a state record. So obviously,
I don't know
January,
how he could have
December
done
is
it out of without drilling a hole in the ice, because when I was there, probably 2014, 2015, it was cold and everything was frozen.
Well, Terry, obviously you're not in a cooling plant lake. That's
Wasn't
what you
at
got
a
to
cooling
do.
plant like there. No, I was at a missile base. Anyway,
This
so,
fish also came from Nelson Lake, the cooling plant lake.
yeah, 8 pound, 1.5 ounce fish. It was caught on a spinnerbait out of Nelson Lake, and a little bit of info about Leon Jerry Rixen is that he was born in 1954 and he was 28 years old at the time of the catch. But that's not just the catch. The other catch is what he does.
Yeah,
50
wait a
days later.
second, everybody. Wait a second, because
Yeah.
one of the things I want to throw in here is that Leon Rixen was not your usual state record catcher. Your usual state record catcher is somebody who stumbles onto the fish and gets remarkably lucky. That's
Dave Zimmerly.
what do you want to say? Is that 75% of the anglers who catch a state record, Terry? Would you say, is that fair?
Oh, it's 100%. Yeah.
Yeah, so
Or
the vast majority
close to 100%, because Rixen takes it away from 100%.
Rixen takes it away. There are some guys who take it away from 100%, and Rixen is one of those guys because in researching this story and digging through the old newspapers, mostly coming out of Burlington, North Dakota, Rixen's name pops up all over the place, which tells me two things. One, Leon Rixen is an outstanding angler because he was constantly catching fish over 5 pounds, over 6 pounds, sometimes over 7 pounds. And we know he's got the state record at over 8 pounds. But also it tells me that he had a buddy in the media who was either reaching out to him a lot to find out about these catches, or else Leon Rixen likes to call the media and brag. One of those two is certainly the case. But he was always in the news and got a lot of ink for his big bass catches. He also had some big bluegill catches too.
Oh, I didn't know that. Yeah. So that's where Ken, it's not just the Big Bass podcast, it's the Big Bluegill podcast. It's the Big Perch podcast. Ken goes down these rabbit holes and
Occasionally.
a
little
occasionally.
Sometimes.
Every time.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
But so this guy catches his state record in December of 1982, and Terry, 50 days later.
50 days later, Rixen catches an 8-pound, 7.5 ounce fish. We don't know the size, the length, or the girth, but literally 50 days later, he breaks his own record. And the fact that the fish is caught in February, blows me away that he could find any open water. I mean, he caught it on a jig and a black worm, or a jig and worm, which was pretty popular back in that part of the time. But I mean, was he using it as a topwater lure? Because that bait can't get through the ice. I mean, everything
skittering it across the ice.
Exactly. I mean, it becomes a topwater lure. I don't know. I mean, so he's got to be fishing, obviously, a lake that obviously wasn't frozen over.
Not frozen over. Again, a cooling plant lake, and perhaps Mr. Rixen was casting directly into the cooling facility at that point, because he found open soft water in February in North Dakota, when you would think there ain't no soft water out there. There is just that. And pretty amazing.
You don't need Jesus. You don't need Jesus' feet to walk on water at that point in time. In this state.
It's amazing, and this puts Leon Rixen in our sort of, we need a Big Bass Podcast Hall of Fame, Terry. And obviously
the biggest state record of the smallest weight. Is that what you're talking about?
No. What I was talking about was...
Why not? I mean, come on.
Well, yeah, but no. Leon Rixen needs to be in our Big Bass Podcast Hall of Fame. Let's officially induct him right now. I hope we'll have Nathan's proxy to get his vote. But it takes a 2 out of 3 vote. So if you and I are on the same page, we don't even have to ask Nathan. But I nominate Leon Rixen to go into the Big Bass Podcast Hall of Fame as, I'll bet you, the angler who caught state records closest contemporaneously. 50 days to break his own state record. That's pretty crazy.
It's impressive.
That's
really impressive.
Very impressive. And he
another
caught a lot
I
of
word
big
that
fish.
isn't the I word.
We're waiting on the I word. I think you should have thrown us the I word when we pointed out that just 50 days after he caught another state record. Hats off.
Insane.
There it is. There it is. I would take my hat off, but it's my headphones are holding it on, so I can't do that. But I will say, Leon Rixen, kudos to you, sir. Now 69 years old, and we believe he's living in Harvey, North Dakota. I've located him on Facebook, but I was late in the game and trying to reach out to him, so weren't able to get him on the podcast. Maybe somebody will point the podcast out to Leon Rixen of Harvey, North Dakota, and maybe we can get him on for a future show, because I think he's a legit Hall of Famer. Do I have your vote, Terry Battisti?
You have my vote, and if we could get him on, I bet he's got the thing skin mounted and it's hanging over his fireplace.
I bet you're absolutely right. So, Leon, we're reaching out to you.
Let's get you on. We want to hear about all the big fish that you caught in North Dakota.
It wasn't just a fabulous fishery, although it was obviously that, because the last 3 state records and one very close shot at the state record we're going to tell you about in a moment all came from Nelson Lake. So clearly a superior fishery. And they were predicting state records to come out of Nelson Lake long after the Rixen fish, but it didn't happen. It didn't happen. People were catching big fish. People were saying, "Oh, I hooked one. I'm sure it was a 10, but it got off." But nobody has been able to break 8 pounds, 7.5 ounces, and that record was set, more than 40 years ago now. So that alone is very impressive, to hold a record that long. Now, Terry,
but there was a close call in 1985, though. So
that's exactly where I was going. I was going to get you to tell us about that. We have quite a bit of information about that one. Of course, it's a lot more recent. That's only 28 years ago or whatever. But tell us about the close call in 1995.
So the angler was a guy by the name of Jess Bitterman, Bismarck, North Dakota. The weight of the fish was 8 pounds, 4 ounces. We know the length and we know the girth. The length was 23 inches and the girth was 18.5 inches. And I mean, that is a respectable fish. Those measurements out of other states, the fish might have weighed more, but that is dang close to an 8.4.
Yeah,
Uh,
here's what's
the
funny,
date.
Terry. I'm sorry, I'm just going to interrupt for a
Go
moment here
ahead.
because in researching the North Dakota state record for largemouth, I came across this article from the Bismarck Tribune in October of 1995, and we'll scan it and give you guys a better picture. But there's a photo
Yeah,
of Jess Bitterman. I'm sorry, of
veteran.
Bismarck. Uh, Jess Bitterman holding up his fish, and the caption says, Jess Bitterman shows off an 18 and a half pound largemouth he caught from Nelson Lake. And that's what got my attention right away. I'm thinking, that doesn't look like 18 and a half pounds. Of course, what they meant to
Yeah,
say it was 18 and a half inches or 8 and a quarter pounds. But that's
yeah.
just, that's just 3.5 ounces off the state record right there.
3.5 ounce off the state record. The measurements add up. Um, it's a good fish. Uh, and what does the date on that newspaper article say?
It doesn't have a date for the catch. We
It
don't
doesn't have a
know.
date.
No, it doesn't tell us what the date is because this story is really not about Bitterman's catch. Um, as you can see here, it says Bismarck angler heads for World Bass Tournament, and the article is about Bitterman
But the
having.
date, but the date on that says 10/28/1995.
Well, I'm sorry,
So
that's the
we
date of
know
the
that
newspaper article.
right. So we know that it was caught prior to that. So
Yes, yes.
at least we have that as a some sort of date.
1995, yeah, it was caught in
Yeah.
95. We know
Hmm.
we don't know what time in 95. You know, just like the last three state record holders,
Yeah.
Nelson Lake, Nelson Lake, Nelson Lake,
Yep.
Nelson Lake, and now this
Yep.
fish that was very, very close to the state record, Nelson Lake.
Right. And so this
Um,
was the biggest fish that was caught that year, and it qualified him to go to the Bass and Magazine Big Bass World Record Championship. And we actually
yeah,
have a writer by the name of Andy Williamson who was qualified for that out of South Dakota 8 times. And he is the only angler to qualify for the Big Bass World Championship 8 times. So kudos to you, Andy Williamson.
yeah, that's
Anyway,
impressive.
finish it.
For most of the big Bass World Championship era, which was, as you know, as you said, put on by Bass and Magazine, I was living in
Yeah.
Georgia, and there was always the same guy, over and over and over again qualifying, and he was
Yeah.
fishing. I'll call it semi-private water because it was water on a military base, and he had access, and few other people did. I think he was a civilian who either worked on the base or had a buddy, but every year he'd catch a 15 or a 16-pound fish and go to the Big Bass World Championship. And it pissed me off, Terry. It pissed me off because I couldn't fish this
On the military
obvious,
base.
because I knew if I could get out there, obviously I could catch a world record, not just some
Right.
measly 15 or 16. But
Yep.
yeah, Bitterman got to go to the Big Bass World Championship. It was in Central Florida that year on a 3,000-acre lake in the county where I live. He did not win. Some guy from Illinois won. I think it was a 1 or 2 day tournament. And this guy caught a 6 or 7 pound fish. But Bitterman
Yep.
almost, we look at the weight, and he's 3.5 ounces off the state record. But Terry Bitterman actually may have been a little closer to the record even than that.
Well, yeah, it took him an hour to get from the lake to a certified scale. And we all know that fish, lose a lot of water weight. They lose whatever weight, due to being transported, put in a bucket or a live well or what have you. Um, so, who is to say that that fish may not have broken the record? But my counter to that is how long did it take Rixen to get his fish weight? We don't know because
Yeah.
that information isn't known. It could have taken Rixen all day to get to a certified scale for the first fish. For the second fish, he may have been more prepared. I don't know, but we don't know if we don't know.
I haven't been able to confirm this, but at one time, and maybe still, Nelson Lake was catch and release. And ordinarily, a lake that's catch and release is not going to allow you to transport a fish in that
Right.
manner. But
Yep.
maybe those rules were softened in the mid 90s. Maybe those rules don't still exist. So I was curious
Maybe
about
they
that.
didn't exist. Maybe they didn't exist at that point in time.
Well, I think they existed before Bitterman's fish in 95. I'm not sure if they might have been relaxed or what the deal was, but I've seen some different reports about that. Haven't been able to get to the bottom of it, so I don't want to say that it was strictly catch and release at that time. But whether it was or whether it wasn't, he missed the record. He was 3.5 ounces short of tying it, and Leon Rixen, long live Leon Rixen of Harvey, North Dakota, who we want on this show. We need him right here.
Yeah, it would be great to have Rixen on the show, and if Bitterman's still alive, it would be great to have him on both at the same time. And
there you go.
And discuss why were they record holders or near record holders, or did they know each other? I mean, there's a whole bunch of stuff that we could put together a show with, and I think it would be a pretty cool deal. I mean, it's North Dakota, folks, yet there are bass fishermen that live in the Dakotas that matter, and it doesn't matter how big their fish was. The fact is that they either had or pushed the state record, and that's something to say for these cold weather impoundments or lakes.
And that's your takeaway, huh? There is something to say for these lakes. And once again, Terry, I'll give you my quick takeaway here. A small body of water, under 600 acres. And, and the body of water that produced the record before that was 28 acres. You know? So these are tiny bodies of water producing, it's relative, gigantic fish. An 8-pound fish in North Dakota is enormous. It is the equivalent of a 20-pound fish in California or Florida. It is the equivalent.
Mm-hmm. And what's the record for Florida again? Isn't it like
official or unofficial?
8.
They have both.
The official record?
17.27.
Okay. Yeah, that's
caught in the mid 80s by Bill O'Berry. Bill O'Berry, where are you? I'm trying to track you down. I want to find Bill O'Berry. I've heard he may be in Georgia now. If you know Bill O'Berry, please put him in touch with us. We're going to give our email addresses away in just a moment. But Bill O'Berry caught that in the mid 80s in a unnamed body of water in the county where I live. So as you know, I am immersed in big fish territory here, Terry Battisti. Immersed.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Exactly.
All right, my takeaway is, focus on those small lakes. In this case, if you're going up far north and you got a power plant cooling facility, that's where you need to be throwing. Longer growing season.
Yeah. Longer growing season. You can fish 12 months a year. Yeah, absolutely.
I think that does it. I think we're all set on the North Dakota state record largemouth bass, the smallest state record largemouth bass in the nation. Leon Rixen, call us.
Give us a call. All right. So I think it's time to slam the door on this episode of the Big Bass Podcast. Thank you for joining us. Excuse me.
No, I'm sincere. I'm not coughing. I'm not choking when I say thank you for joining us. We know your time is valuable. We appreciate your spending some of it with us. If you enjoyed the show, please hit the like and subscribe buttons. And if you really liked it, please share the show with your friends. It would help us a lot. We're really trying to grow this thing and make it bigger and find an audience. And if you have ideas on how we can make it better, we want to hear from you. And we're about to give out those email addresses. But if you're a Big Bass junkie, you might want to check out our website. It's thebigbasspodcast.com. You'll find our Big Bass podcast calculator, created by none other than Dr. Terry Battisti. It's got a calculator that's good for fish over 14 pounds. And we also have lists of state record largemouth, smallmouth, and spotted bass. If you want to reach us, here it is. Leon Rixen, Bill O'Berry, here it is. Ken at thebigbasspodcast.com. Terry at thebigbasspodcast.com. Nathan at thebigbasspodcast.com. Please join us again next time. We'll bring you another story about another big bass that you will not, that you cannot find anywhere else. And Terry, what do they need to remember?
Size matters.